Well, good morning and welcome to the June meeting of the Community and Cultural Investment Subcommittee. This subcommittee focuses on our city efforts around sustainability and recycling, our neighborhoods, parks, arts, libraries, education, and Head Start and homelessness. I would like to call this meeting to order. Today is June 1st, 2022, and the time is 10:06 a.m. We will start this meeting with call to the public. Do we have any?
There are no calls to the public.
Thank you. We have a representative from the Law Department with us today to read a brief statement on the public comment section of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. During the call to the public, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matter discussed. With respect to comments on agenda items, members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to approve the minutes of last month's subcommittee. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from May 4th, 2022?
Motion.
Move to approve.
Oh, second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion passes. Next, we will move to the consent items on our agenda, items 2 through 4. These items are request approval of Head Start Birth to 5 ERCEA plan updates, artist fabrication construction oversight and installation contract for East Lake Park Streetscape Arts Project. For 2015 through 20 consolidated plans, 2019 annual plan CARES Act amendment. Is there a motion for consent items 2 through 4?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And now we will move to items for information only. Next on the agenda, we have item 5. The Head Start Birth to 5 monthly report, April 2022. And would any of my colleagues like to hear more information on any of these items? Great. Okay, now we will move. I would now like to make a motion that we take item 10, the annual neighborhood services code enforcement policy review, out of order. Item 10 is for discussion and possible action. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes. We will begin with Deputy City Manager Alan Stevenson and Neighborhood Services Department presentation on item 10.
Madam Chair, I believe Alan has given it over to Spencer Self, the Director of the Department.
Perfect. Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the subcommittee. Today I am joined by Bob Lozier, our Deputy Neighborhood Preservation Division Director with the Neighborhood Services Department to discuss this item. Our code enforcement policy was adopted in 2006 and notes that it will be reviewed and evaluated annually by the City Council. We have not formally brought this document forward for such a review in recent years, so we wanted to restart the review process by bringing forward some minor changes that are really low-hanging fruit and start a conversation with you about the policy as we look to a potentially more in-depth review over the coming year. I will now hand the presentation over to Bob to provide more details.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I oversee NSD's Code Compliance Program as Deputy Director, and I'm pleased to be with you to review the Code Enforcement Policy, which is also known as the CEP. The CEP went into effect in June 2006 and was created to provide guidelines for the enforcement of city codes that NSD is responsible for. including the neighborhood preservation and zoning ordinances, as well as portions of the animal and business ordinances. Now, I admit that this will likely not be the most exciting topic on your agenda today. However, it is important from the perspective that this policy applies for up to 50,000 code enforcement cases annually. So I'd like to start with a brief review of the standard code enforcement process. This is the process that the overwhelming majority of our cases follow. The timeline you see here is used frequently in our resident education resources. The process begins with the intake of resident complaints through our seamless service team, who open cases and assign them to neighborhood preservation inspectors per geographic assignments. If there has been no violation history in the prior 24 months, a pre-notification letter is issued and the first inspection is conducted within 10 days. For vacant properties with potential hazards, inspections are conducted within 48 hours. If a violation is observed at the first inspection, a notice of ordinance violation, or NOV, is issued to all responsible parties with a specified date for compliance. The property is inspected again at the expiration of the notice, and if the violation has been corrected, the case is closed for compliance. In cases where the violation has not been corrected, NSD may pursue civil citation, contractual abatement, and in rare cases, the filing of criminal charges. With that, I'll walk you through a quick overview of the 6 sections of the code enforcement policy, the first of which is titled Standard Code Enforcement. This section establishes the purpose of code enforcement and providing for the health, safety, and welfare of Phoenix residents. It describes the variety of notifications and progressive enforcement actions, including issuance of pre-notification letters, NOVs, civil citations, criminal complaints, and city abatement notices. Section 2 sets forth the parameters for determining recidivism for repeat offenders and notification policy for such cases. Generally, a repeat offense by the same party for the same or similar violation within 24 months is considered recidivist. I've highlighted this section as it is the subject of an amendment we are recommending today. Section 3 explains that NSD code enforcement is administered on a complaint basis to encourage resident and neighborhood participation. It also describes exceptions to the complaint policy for proactive code enforcement, including the immediate area of a complaint and in defined strategic areas, such as neighborhood initiative and redevelopment areas. Section 4 encourages the use of hardship assistance programs to resolve certain violations for low and moderate income households, including housing rehabilitation, weatherization, housing and landlord-tenant counseling, volunteer assistance, tool lending, and graffiti abatement. Section 5 provides guidance for NSD to engage with other departments and agencies to resolve complex and nuisance cases which have significant impacts on neighborhoods. And lastly, Section 6 references the annual review of the CEP and is the purpose for this discussion today. Updates to the NSD contact information make up the bulk of the changes we are seeking approval for today. These include updating the NSD mission statement and the primary phone number for reporting a code violation. The updates also include adding information on how to check the status of a code enforcement case online, as well as the addition of My Phoenix 311 as the primary option to report code violations. NSD continues to promote the use of My Phoenix 311 for resident concerns, and this is yet another opportunity to advertise this important resource. And here is a draft of the amended department information page that I just described. As mentioned before, the current recidivist notification policy in Section 2C is shown here. The proposed amendment to this section was developed in response to resident feedback regarding the term legal fast track, which has been the source of frustration and misinterpretation for some. Residents have expressed the expectation that the term means a case will move more quickly through the code enforcement process to compliance. In practice, the policy refers to bypassing pre-notification letters and NOVs and proceeding immediately to a civil citation, criminal summons, or contractual abatement action. While the process does move the case to initiate court or abatement action more quickly, these actions come with timelines that significantly exceed standard notification with voluntary compliance in most cases. The revised policy language is shown here. Our goal with this amendment is to assist residents to better understand the notification progression for recidivists by more practically describing the process and eliminating the legal fast track term. With that, I'll turn it back to Spencer.
Thank you, Bob. And with that, we request subcommittee recommend adoption of the CEP as drafted and look forward to further conversations about more substantial changes over the next year. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that presentation. And with that, I would like to open it up for discussion. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? Councilwoman Ansari?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Spencer, thank you so much for the presentation. As you're aware, my team has been in conversations with you around code enforcement when it comes to unsheltered residents, and specifically unsheltered residents who may be sleeping on private property. So I'm wondering, can you talk about whether we are able to make any updates to the enforcement policy to include guidelines for NSD staff on how to address situations like this where someone may be supporting someone and trying to house someone who's unsheltered for the greater public good, but maybe it doesn't technically define or align with our codes. So I'll start with that.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilwoman Ansari, I think that is a great topic of conversation. And as you mentioned, we've been in discussions with your office as well as some of the members of the public and the community who are facing that exact difficulty. And so we, of course, as a city want to support any efforts to help shelter folks who are experiencing homelessness. We know that homelessness is not a crime and is not a violation of any of our city codes in and of itself, but we also know that it can be tied to other violations that may exist on a private property. And so what we want to look at over this next year is how can we do just that? How can we make sure that in the enforcement of our codes, we are also recognizing that folks who have a heart and are working closely with our unsheltered community, that we can work in partnership to view that situation less as just a violation and more of as a hardship, one that we want to work together to address, looking at the city's resources as well. And I know we've talked to Scott Hall in the city manager's office about what we can do to work a little more seamlessly related to that. But I do think that is something that over this next year we can do a little more work to figure out what language we could adopt in our code enforcement policy that could treat that as a hardship in that section of the policy to make sure that we are extending those services whenever possible.
Okay, so my understanding is that you'll work on potential updates to the codes in the coming year. In the meantime, would it be possible to work on written guidelines for staff who may not be aware of these complexities and nuances, and make sure that, you know, if someone is trying to help their neighbors, they're not getting cited, or just I feel like there just needs to be a little bit more training for staff to make that clear to folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We will be working on not just written guidelines, but we will also work on training to make sure that all of our code enforcement inspectors are aware of those particular challenges.
Okay, that would be great. And I think that particular case was definitely a success story. This woman who was providing shelter in her front yard, I know she spoke with you, she spoke with Scott, and she was actually able to get housing for those individuals. And I just want to make sure someone who maybe isn't as, you know, savvy when it comes to connecting with the city and city leaders also gets the same education. So we are working on some neighborhood events there to try to educate people around that. But I think on the staff side at the city, even avoiding getting to that point would be very helpful. So thank you. The other question I have is about a completely different issue. We've also been in touch with you about animal neglect and tethering issues, and how NSD may be able to fit into addressing those issues that we've heard from constituents in my district. So currently, enforcement of those ordinances comes through a contract that the city has with the Humane Society. But I'm just wondering if we are, if ultimately it turns out that we maybe involve NSD in a bigger way, whether it's through outreach or through enforcement, would that be something that needs to be updated before the Humane Society contract's renewal on June 15th, or is that something that we could work on after the fact?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Ansari, that is a much larger conversation. Certainly on the outreach side, I see no reason why we can't play a better role in helping to educate and inform the community about resources that may be available and how we can play a role in that. On the enforcement side, I don't know exactly how that would look for us to begin enforcing those codes. But I would suspect that it would be in line with our code enforcement policy. I don't think our policy would need to be modified in any way in advance of that change.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Spencer and Bob, for the presentation. My question's around language barriers on citations. We've gotten notice from some of our neighbors that they may not understand what they're receiving. So just wondering how we work through or how we can add translation services or better support folks that might not be English speakers only.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Garcia, that's a great question, and actually one that staff and I were just having yesterday about all of our services. We of course offer translation services both in real time as well as some translated documents, but we're currently reviewing all of our documents to make sure that we have that translated, and that includes the code enforcement policy that's here before you today. We want to make sure that that's available, as well as that alternative format for any of our citations or the language in our notices. Any of that communication, we want to make sure that that's accessible. And I don't know, Bob, if you have any additional information about how your team handles that when we do face that particular barrier.
The only thing I would add is we do in our hiring processes include emphasis on Spanish as a second language, and then the inspectors are also equipped with resources when they're at somebody's doorstep and they don't speak their native tongue to be able to access that resource on their phone and have a translation through their cellular phone while they're having those conversations, and that is actually very helpful. And then as a follow-up to that, we can also look to provide written documentation in the translated language that we identify during that conversation.
One of the tools I'll just add, we have a language access plan that also we use within the department where we have certain documents that are available to all of our staff where it has multiple languages. So of course we know we have lots of folks who have a dominant language as Spanish speaking, but we have a lot of other languages spoken as a primary language across the city. And so we want to make sure that our services are accessible for everyone. And so that document helps folks to just be able to point out which language they speak, and that helps our team better identify and make sure that we're connecting with the right translator for that person.
Thank you. And just a reminder, I think on the citations piece, it's also important, on both ends it's important, but I think when someone receives a citation, they can't understand it and they can't address the problem. So it'd be good to figure that out. Thank you.
A follow-up question to that. So let's just say that, mistakes happen, stuff happens, we're a big city. What happens if someone does get the citation in Spanish, in English, but they speak a completely different language? How do we address that to making sure that, if the person says, I just don't speak the language, I didn't know what that was, how do we deal with that then?
Sure, Madam Chair, that is a great question, and it can be challenging. Our code enforcement, we very much pride ourselves on having an above 95% voluntary compliance rate. And really what that means is that we want to work with all of our residents. We don't want to take it to the citation stage. We don't want to get into court. As Bob mentioned in the presentation, that tends to take longer than voluntary compliance. We know that bridging that gap and making that connection and having that conversation is much more impactful than a written notice. All of our notices are devised around really trying to initiate that conversation, having folks contact us. When we don't have that good contact, that means that our inspectors need to go that extra mile. And so they're going out, they're certainly knocking on doors, they're leaving additional documents, and there is an escalated process. And I'll again turn to Bob for more details, but certainly by the time we get to court, there's every opportunity available to identify that that is a barrier and the obligation for us to overcome that barrier. Because of course, not having any communication, not being able to properly serve individuals and have their due process, that doesn't end up well for anyone if it continues down the line without being addressed.
And just follow up to what you just said, when it comes to the inspectors, do we feel that we have enough inspectors so that they will go the extra mile and talk to the residents and educate people on how to avoid these fines or how to avoid to getting to this place of having to go to court or having it escalate?
So if the question is about do we have enough staff to properly perform all of those functions, I think that is something that we right now are in the process of evaluating. Not just because of challenges and barriers that we're seeing out in the community, but also because some of the issues that we're dealing with are just bigger issues than what we've dealt with historically. And I know we spoke a little bit about issues related to homelessness as one of those items. There are big issues, wicked problems that as a city we're trying to determine the best way to handle. And for our inspectors who are out in the field, as Bob mentioned, we have approaching 50,000 cases a year that we're doing with about 50 inspectors, a little less than 50 inspectors, covering the entire 500 plus square miles of the city of Phoenix. So we want to be efficient with our services, we want to be effective with our services and really create processes that help achieve the results that we're after. But we do need to evaluate, do we have the right resources to do that fairly and equitably across the city?
Right, because I just understand every time we make changes, it's either going to require more staff or less staff. And it would be nice to know how much more staff you would actually need to be able to conduct the work the way it needs to get done. And that's the only piece that makes me a little bit nervous, is just making sure, one, that we have adequate staff and that we have enough folks that can go out and do the functions the way we need them to do it. And I understand that hiring is an issue. So if we can just look into that in terms of how many more people we need and how do we evaluate that before we start giving more work to the folks that we currently have. Thank you. Any other questions? So with that, is there a motion to approve item 10?
Motion.
Move to approve item 10.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes. We will thank you so much. And we will now move to items 6 through 9, which are for information and discussion. We will begin with item 6, which is the solid waste contained collections citywide reroute.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, the team from Public Works is coming to the table now.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Joe Giudice, Public Works Director. I am going to turn this presentation over to Mr. Felipe Moreno, our Assistant Public Works Director, and Ms. Lori Stoller, Deputy Public Works Director.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Today we're here to talk about an important project within the solid waste collection operation, which is a citywide reroute of our contained refuse, recycle, and green organics routes. Oh, there you go. All right, just to give you an overview of how we're set up now, we currently service over 418,000 homes. We have 271 solid waste equipment operators providing that service, and we operate out of 4 different regions. One up at Union Hills, which is our north region. We have East region, which is Okemah off the 10 and Ann Street. Our west region is Glen Rosa, which is 43rd Avenue and Glen Rosa. And then our south region is 22nd Avenue and Lower Buckeye. So why reroute? That's the big question. And honestly, it really comes around to growth and increased customer demand. So the last time we did a reroute of the city, it was in 2009. And since that time, we've had 13 years of customer growth. We've mainly in the north and southwest. So there's a heat map here. So you can see in the southwest, the yellow is where we're most heavily growing, as well as the north. The red is more less heavy, but still intense growth, and then the blue is more of our infill. We've added more than 27,000 homes during this time, and so basically with all of that, we need to reroute the city to be optimizing our routes to increase our ability to service the increased demand. The benefits that we're looking to achieve here is redistributed workloads. So we really want to make sure that we're creating flexibility in how we assign our routes in our daily work to be able to manage the day and bring our drivers in at a reasonable time. Reduce miles through operational efficiencies. Reducing miles to the transfer station and around the neighborhoods is always a goal to just optimize those routes. And then, continued customer service, making sure that our customer service continues to be at a high level. Our residents, a lot of times you hear they set their watch to the time the driver comes to their house. So we want to continue to make sure that we can be reliable and dependable in providing that service. And then ensuring staffing and equipment resources match the service demands. So this reroute is going to allow for the current customer growth we've experienced, but also we've planned for the next 2 years of growth that we know that is coming online. So this allows us to be more nimble and absorb the growth that we see coming through our continued houses that are growing in the north and southwest. So our customer impact, this will impact a lot of our customers. So 80% of our customers will experience a day of collection change, but there will be no impact to our bulk trash program or the household hazardous waste program, which has now gone curbside. So all of our other services are going to remain the same. This is really just looking at the refuse, recycle, and green organics contained collection. And with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Public Works Director Lori Zelda Steller, who will talk about our robust communication and outreach plan for our residents.
Thanks, Felipe. Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. As Felipe mentioned, about 80% of our customers will be impacted by this service change. So this means they're going to have a new day of collection, so a new day that their truck will be running down their street collecting. So it'll be important for us to ensure that we're engaging our community and making sure they understand their new day of service. So we do have a plan in place to communicate these service changes in both English and Spanish. We will provide individual notifications for residents with special collections. Special collections are those residents that have multiple days of collections. We have about 10,000 customers that do have different days of collection. So maybe on Monday they have a garbage truck, and then Wednesday they have a recycle truck. So we will reach out personally to those customers, knock on their doors through our field specialists. They'll do dedicated walk and talks for those customers. We do have Spanish-speaking specialists available. They're also certified, so they can take any communications in Spanish. And then we also are planning to provide multiple modes of communication, such as leaving door hangers, social media posts, newsletter updates, city service bills updates, and our website updates. Our timeline includes completing the reroute development that we're currently working on right now. Then come August, we'll do formal council notifications and communications to all the council offices to advise how many customers are going to be impacted in each of your districts, so you're able to handle any constituent calls. As well, in September, we'll launch a media communication plan to advise of these service changes. And then September 5th, we will do a mass mailing to those 80% customers. Those will be probably a postcard of some nature that will advertise this is your new day of service starting the week of October 3rd. So we want to do that a month in advance. And then September 19th, which is 2 weeks in advance to the go-live date, we'll do those specialized collection walk and talks that I mentioned. And then our go-live date for these service changes will be the week of October 3rd. So as I mentioned, October 3rd is the target date. We do understand that there will be some transition. Some customers may not have received the notice or they weren't home when we knocked on their door. So we do anticipate that we'll have to offer courtesy collections. We're ready to do that for up to 2-3 months if needed to ensure that our customers understand their new day of collection. And then as well, during the go live time frame, we'll have increased presence from our field staff working in the neighborhoods and ensuring containers are out on their new day of collection. So with that, we can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns, comments? None? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for that, and thank you for all of your hard work. Perfect. And now with that, we will now move to item 7, which is the Parks and Recreation Summer Programs Update.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the Parks and Recreation team is on their way to the dais as well. And again, summer is here and the programs are beginning, so they're here to tell you about the exciting news there.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm Cynthia Aguilar, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm here today with our 2 assistant directors, Marty Whitfield and Tracy Hall, and we will be providing you with an update on our summer recreation programs and our aquatics program. So with that, I will turn it over to Marty.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. At your request, we're here to provide the subcommittee an update on the summer recreation for our summer camp program and aquatics program. The Parks Department offers summer camps Monday through Friday for youth ages 6 to 12 during the summer months of May, June, and July. Our fee structure ranges from free of charge to $80 per week, which is equivalent to $16 per day. Our fees are based on the size of the facility and the available amenities at each location. In addition to our weekly program, we also offer daily drop-ins for youth as well. In comparison to other municipalities in the Valley, the City of Phoenix Summer Camp Program is the least expensive option for our families. This summer is uniquely different because non-municipal programs are offering free day camps through the state's AZ On-Track Summer Camp Program, which is funded by federal relief funds. The eligibility for this program is you must be a nonprofit or school to apply. And 2 examples of recipients of the program are the Boys and Girls Club and YMCA. We offer summer camp program at 24 sites citywide, which are shown on the screen. Currently, space is available at the majority of our locations. We do have a few sites that have filled up for June already. Just a reminder, our program is a fun atmosphere for youth and offers many great activities like monthly field trips, water days, arts and crafts, sports, games, and STEM activities. In addition, each camp participant receives a camp t-shirt and is offered daily meals. How do we get the word out to the community? Our team markets the summer camp program on social media, in our after-school program, to schools, at park events, at neighborhood association meetings with flyers, and via email blast. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Assistant Director Tracy Hall to provide an update on our swim program. Ms. Hall?
Good morning. Again, I'm Tracy Hall, and I'm happy to discuss the 2022 season for aquatics and swim lessons. Pools opened this past weekend on Saturday, May 28th, for the Memorial Day weekend. We were excited to report pools were busy and families were excited to begin another pool season. Our attendance exceeded over 8,800 visitors for the weekend, which is a higher number than we've seen in the past couple of years when pools have been open. We reopened this Saturday, June 4th. During the season, pools are open every day except for Fridays from noon to 6. Our regular season ends July 31st, and then we will have limited pools open on weekends until September 5th. This year, we are opening 14 pools. The 14 pools are listed in the matrix and shown on the map. 8 of the pools will be open on weekends until Labor Day. Swimming is an important skill, especially in Arizona. Research shows that formal swimming lessons reduce the risk of drownings amongst children ages 1 to 4. This is why it's important that we offer swim lessons. Swim lessons will be held at each open pool site. Lessons are offered beginning June 6th until July 28th for ages 6 months to 12 years. Our lessons are taught in 8 classes per session. Each class is 30 minutes in length. There are 4 days a week for 2 weeks. The cost per session is only $15, which equates to $1.86 per class. Our costs are less than classes offered in any other local municipalities. And thanks to the generous donation of $10,000 from the Arizona Diamondbacks, we are able to further reduce swim lessons costs to $3 for 831 of the available 7,971 registration spaces. These reduced cost spaces are spread out to all of the open pool locations, and that equates to 38 cents per class. Marketing is an important aspect of our swim lesson program. As such, we market our swim lessons on our website, via social media. We have flyers at pools, and we've done on-air interviews. In fact, our aquatic supervisor, Becky Kurt, did approximately 6 interviews in the past week. And in efforts to promote our classes to historically underrepresented demographics, we have reached out to Spanish media and had an interview today with Radio Enlace and have provided information to the local African American newspaper, the Arizona Informant, which plans to print the information. We look forward to Phoenix children enjoying quality programming and time in our pools this summer. That concludes our presentation, and we can answer any questions.
Questions, comments? I guess I just had one question. Just talking about the swim lessons and instructors and supervisors. I know that it's great that we've opened up 2 more pools this year. But I guess my question is, do we already have a plan in terms of recruitment for next year? Is that already in place?
Yes. Councilmember Guardado and members of the subcommittee, we are actively still recruiting for lifeguards and staff. In addition to that, we are heavily promoting our lifeguard academy and junior lifeguards. So for those who are currently not prepared to be a lifeguard or not qualified at this time, that they will know the steps, the requirements, and can practice so they can become certified next year. So it is a year-long process, and we are really trying to rebuild our program as our focus for next year.
And then I know that we had some issues in terms of supervisors and making sure that we had enough supervisors, and I know that maybe part of the issue is that we're asking for them to have 2 years experience. Are we already talking to maybe some of the lifeguards that have been with us already for a good, for at least 2 years, to see how many of them we can promote? Are we looking into that as well?
Yes, we are. We're actively looking into how we can expand our base in terms of the supervisors as well as the lifeguards with our existing staff, and those maybe we can pull from other resources that have experience as well.
So maybe after the break, I would like to see a plan in terms of, what schools we're getting into, who are the folks that we're talking to in terms of being able to recruit, be able to recruit more lifeguards, but then being able to have enough supervisors. I think it would be very nice if we could have a goal of opening at least 80-90% of our pools next year. And I think if we start early on, we might be, hopefully we'll be able to get there. But with that, excited to seeing everything that you guys are doing. And then my last question, I guess, is, in the pools, are we full capacity? Are we letting everyone in, or are we still limiting?
No, we are no longer doing reservation-based, so that's what we started with last year and then found that we could open it up. So it is open up to the public as first come, first serve, and we're getting great numbers, but not to the point where we are limiting folks from entering.
Great, thank you. And then in the camps, are we are we promoting the fact that we have reduced prices just for those families that even $80 a week would be a little bit out of their budget? Are we making sure that we're out there and we're promoting that?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, let me approach that answer this way. We don't turn any youth away. If a family does have a hardship, if they bring that to our attention, we will work with them. We can offer a payment plan, or we do have funds that are dedicated for scholarships for the youth. So we don't turn anyone away.
Right. But I think if I were to see $80 and it's out of my budget, I might not even try, to try to come in. So I was just thinking, or unless our camps, so then let me ask you this, are our camps full? Are we at full capacity?
Sorry about that. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, each week we have about 1,600 spaces available for our summer camp programs, and after 6 days we're at 47%, so we are not full for the majority of our locations.
And Madam Chair, I will add, Marty's correct, we do have some sites that are full for certain weeks or maybe the month of June, but there's a lot of availability within a majority of our sites. To your question on a reduced cost, that is something we have worked out internally, and it's something it's tricky because some families have registered already, and so they may want to go backwards because we didn't advertise a half-a-day program or something like that. However, what we can do is we can make sure that we note that somewhere, that information is noted, that if you would like a half-a-day option, that's something that we can work with your family. I think you and I have spoke about this before with some of those camps that are ending half day around the valley. Some families might be looking for something. That's something that recently came to our attention. So we've worked a way out to do that internally. We can look to figure out how we can make sure parents who have not registered yet are aware of that option.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Okay. Other questions? Okay, so now we will move to item 9, which is a water conservation update.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, items 8 and 9 are actually going to be heard together, and they're both about water. And so there are some items that are answered in one presentation that might be asked in the first presentation. So Karen will explain that process. Karen Peters, Deputy City Manager, will explain that so that we get a great comprehensive evaluation of the water and the drought management system, or the MAP plan for the coming foreseeable future. So Karen?
Thank you, Inger. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I am pleased to introduce the next 2 items and look forward to hearing your feedback on these important issues. As we continue the work to achieve the Council's and community's vision to be the most sustainable desert city, it is clear that long-term water security is the foundation that underlies it all. This morning, we'll share information regarding the state of one component of the city's water resource portfolio that is under severe stress, the Colorado River, and how the city's overall resource mix and infrastructure are being used to adapt. We'll also update you and the community about the city's drought management plan and our ongoing and successful work in water conservation, which is critical to the city's long-term sustainability. So with me today to present are Troy Hayes, Water Services Director, Cynthia Campbell, our Water Resources Management Advisor, as well as a new face to most of you. I'm delighted to introduce you to the city's new Water Conservation Coordinator, Dr. Max Wilson. Dr. Wilson's position was created last year to oversee implementation of the recommendations of the Water Conservation Ad Hoc Committee adopted by the Council. He has worked in natural resource management for more than a decade. He is both a highly influential scientist and a proven program manager, developing projects that empower water users of all types to do their part for water conservation, while also publishing seminal works in the areas of hydrology, sustainability, and biodiversity conservation. Prior to coming to the city, Max worked to improve water resource and habitat management around the globe, including rural China, and oversaw water management programs at Friends of the Verde River, a regional nonprofit that works to develop solutions for some of the most pressing and complex conservation problems our state faces. So now I'll turn it over to Cynthia Campbell, who will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Today we want to talk to you a little bit about the Colorado River, as Karen mentioned, and our drought management plan as well. So before we start talking specifics about the drought management plan, we want to go through again what we have always considered to be what long-term planning in Phoenix means. So we have a diverse and robust water portfolio. It's diverse in the sense that we have multiple sources of water. We don't have all of our eggs in one basket. It's robust in the sense that we've always maintained a volume of water available to us that actually exceeds what we need in any given year, just in case we have a situation that we're about to have. We also have a very strong commitment to investing in infrastructure, because with water being such a precious resource, you can't afford to not invest in infrastructure and then waste water. And so we have a very robust investment in infrastructure that's proactive, trying to get ahead of things. We have a current 100-year assured water supply from the state of Arizona, and we will be going up for redesignation on that in the next several years. But just to cap that off, a 100-year water supply is one that we have to prove to the state is legally, physically available to the city of Phoenix for build out, because we will build out in the next 100 years. We also have a culture of water conservation. That is where we have worked with our customers over our history to really understand that they are desert dwellers and to live in a way that recognizes that and the place of water as a very scarce and precious resource. We value partnerships and resiliencies with other municipalities, with other regional partners, including tribal nations, and we also are always anticipating a hotter, drier future. We plan for it because we live in the desert, and that's a part of what we are and who we are. So just to recap very quickly, this is a schematic which shows how we use our portfolio in any given year. This does not represent our water portfolio per se, other than how we use it. So in any given year, about 58% of the water used in the city of Phoenix comes from the Salt and Verde rivers, about 40% comes from the Colorado River, and we only use 2% groundwater. That's not a reflection of how much groundwater is available to us as much as our understanding that that is a finite resource. It is not generally renewable, and so we save it as a source of last resort. So just speaking briefly about the Colorado River, and I know many of you have already heard some of these statistics, but the Colorado River is in decline. It is experiencing right now the driest conditions that it's seen in over 1,200 years. Lake Mead is only at 31% of capacity and currently has only enough storage in it to last a year for the 3 lower basin states. Lake Powell is at 24% of capacity and may be about 30 feet from dead pool conditions. Just to explain, dead pool means that you may not be able to physically move water out of a reservoir based upon infrastructure constraints. And so dead pool represents a very dire situation, and that's one that the federal government is trying to avoid at all costs. In that vein, the Bureau of Reclamation is taking extraordinary measures this year to protect Lake Powell and its hydropower assets. And so they're holding back water that would have otherwise been delivered to Lake Mead in the lower basin. California, Arizona, and Nevada will experience the loss of that water. And so they're trying to prop up Lake Powell at this point. But by doing so, and if they increase and do it again next year, which we anticipate they will, we're going to find ourselves in a place where they're going to have to do something to save Lake Mead, because Lake Mead will be brought down to almost dead pool. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Troy Hayes to talk to you about what actions the Water Services Department is taking in response.
Thanks, Cynthia. The city has been preparing for drought for decades, developing a diverse water portfolio that will allow the city to manage through this situation. I wanted to highlight some of our recent events to prepare the city for prolonged drought conditions and to be a regional partner to help strengthen the conditions on Lake Mead. In 2014, the City of Phoenix City Council authorized the Colorado River Resiliency Fund. It was designated to fund various resiliency efforts to help protect the city against water shortages on the Colorado River. Some of these initiatives include the Tucson-Phoenix Water Partnership, local watershed protection and restoration, and underground water storage. In 2017, the city partnered with the Gila River Indian Community, the state of Arizona, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Walton Family Foundation to help fund system conservation by leaving water permanently on Lake Mead and to help delay shortages. In 2019, the City of Phoenix, through the leadership of now Vice Mayor Pastor, started an ad hoc water conservation citizens committee, and we'll have a presentation here in a little bit to kind of go over the efforts in that committee. In 2020, we started construction of the drought infrastructure needed to move water resources throughout the city. That infrastructure is currently on pace to be completed later this calendar year and start operational testing in the spring of 2023. And in this next year, we're participating in the 500+ plan with other regional partners by storing water on Lake Mead to once again hold off shortages. Yet as drought intensifies, the city must continue to innovate new proactive actions to prepare for even deeper shortages on the Colorado River, which is over-allocated and in decline due to climate change. The city is prepared to implement additional actions, including those described in our drought management plan. In 1990, the Water Services Department completed the first drought management plan. The state of Arizona requires the department to maintain a drought preparedness plan. Phoenix's drought management plan was reaffirmed by the department in 2021 and is generally outlined with 4 stages, ranging from a stage 1 water alert, where an insufficient water supply situation appears likely, and progressing all the way through stage 4 water crisis. Phoenix has an ordinance that authorizes the drought management plan, and the Phoenix City Code authorizes the Water Services Director to determine whether an implementation of the drought management plan is necessary and determine the appropriate stage of action to take. As Cynthia has presented, our concerns on the Colorado River are continue to materialize, and we feel that it's appropriate time to open the city's drought management plan. And today I am declaring a stage 1 water alert to assist the communication with our customers. Under a stage 1 water alert declaration, the city will increase public education and information programs to assist all of our customers impacted and give them an understanding of the situation and the need to voluntarily conserve. During the early stages of a stressed water supply, the city will ask the customers to voluntarily evaluate and reduce their water use in ways which will minimally impact their lifestyles. We will discuss a few of these in the next presentation that Max will be giving, and we are not asking our customers for any mandatory reductions at this time. A stage 1 water alert is a way for the City of Phoenix to signal to its customers that we face challenges with one of our water resources, the Colorado River, and we are calling on our customers to take an active approach to responsible water use. Phoenix does not have a current water shortage, and we are not proposing mandatory water restrictions, but we are going to increase water conservation efforts. And again, we will go through a lot of those in the next presentation. As you can see on this slide, there is various efforts that we're going to be utilizing to communicate with our customers, and so that effectively allowing them to hear this message. This will range from a contract that we are getting to get media campaigns, either outdoor and on digital, as well as door hangers when we see our staff sees, our city staff sees water wasting that's happening out in the community, to be able to communicate with the customers about that water wasting. While this situation is serious, our previous actions with water resource development, infrastructure investments, and water conservation to prepare Phoenix for shortage. We will partner with our customers to increase awareness and actions to achieve even more sustainable levels of water use and to support a desert lifestyle.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about our work on conservation. Before we begin in that, though, I think it is worth noting that the history of the City of Phoenix is a history of water conservation. Since the 1990s, we've seen per-person water use decline dramatically as our city has become more efficient. And that has happened during a time when population has been growing simultaneously. So as populations have grown, we have not seen that concomitant increase in water use that you may expect. However, we did not want to rest on those laurels and continue in the method that work was previously going on. And as such, in 2019, now Vice Mayor Pastor and then Vice Mayor Williams came together to form the Citizens Ad Hoc Water Conservation Subcommittee. This group proposed a conservation plan with 14 programs that would be implemented in 3 phases. These 3 phases are roughly organized around the types of work that we can get done relatively quickly, and then work that eventually moves into longer-term, longer efforts. However, I think it's very important that before we ask our citizens to do anything, the city lead by example in its own operations, and I'm proud to say that the city has done so. The most important way in which this work has taken place is through the Water Efficiency Task Force. This is an interdepartmental working group focusing on reducing city water use, established in 2012, and it meets on a regular basis. And I do want to point out that this is a relatively unique thing among many of the other cities in the Southwest. And breaking down those silos is an important part of reducing our water use overall. Some examples of progress that have related from this program: aviation has converted cooling towers and into xeriscape landscaping at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Parks Irrigation has installed smart controllers. These are controllers that keep the sprinklers from turning on when it rains, which is a relatively important thing. City Hall is getting ready to undergo a plumbing retrofit so that as we are doing the sewer retrofits throughout the City Hall lines, those low efficiency appliances are being upgraded at the same time. And we've also seen substantial reductions in lost and unaccounted for water. This is the water that comes through our plants but we cannot account for on the delivery end. Reducing down to 8.5% in the last year, which is a very substantial change from 10% in previous years. Moving into the plan specifically, I will apologize up front. We do have a fair number of slides here, but there's a lot of programs and everybody has their favorite ones, so we want to make sure that all of them are covered here. This first phase is largely built around trying to take existing resources that we've seen work either within the city or at other cities and expanding those to a bigger picture. The most obvious of these is our water budget calculator. The fact of the matter is that most folks, when they water their yard, don't know how much water they actually need to apply to their yard. We all guess. What the water budget calculator does is allows you to put in some basic numbers about what your yard looks like and tells you exactly how much water you need to be applying every single month. And then you can take that information and either guide it as you water with a hose or as you use your irrigation controller to try to couple those pieces together. This is hosted in both English and Spanish, as all of our resources that I'll discuss today are. Now, it's one thing to ask customers to use their water budgets, and I think it's important, again, that if we are going to do so, we ask the city to do the same thing. As such, we have begun piloting a landscape pilot contract. The idea here is that we've developed water budgets for pilot sites, and we're tying those water budgets to vendor performance as they actually maintain our water services sites. So we've dedicated specific water budgets for each one of these sites and are tracking whether that watering is actually matching over time. This work is just getting underway now. Beyond water budgets themselves, we think it's also very important that folks have access to water conservation information. One of the great accomplishments of my field in my lifetime has been how much we've learned about how water conservation works. However, getting that information out to the public is extremely challenging, and historically in the city of Phoenix, this has mostly been done through physical paper. Moving this information so that it is all digitalized and available on the cloud in both English and in Spanish is an incredible resource for the community, and one that we're proud to continue to grow as more information becomes available. However, it's not enough for us to leave that information on the cloud where it may or may not be found. We need to get that information out to the public. This is largely done through volunteer events and through workshops. Volunteer events and workshops are very consuming of staff time. They take us off working on other projects that we could otherwise be working on. And therefore, we've looked to develop a citizen volunteer program similar to the Park Stewards program, which you may be aware of. We've already held one session for this group, the Water Wranglers, and are looking at our second session right now, which will be beginning June 30th. You may have seen some of the social media just beginning on this in the last couple of days. And we'd encourage anybody who's interested in these volunteer opportunities where they'll be able to help us get information about water conservation out to the public to go to Phoenix.gov/Water Wrangler and sign up today so we can get you into that next session. Moving on from phase one, which again was very focused on expanding programs that we had seen work everywhere else, into phase two, this is where we wanted to take things that had begun to take hold and see if we could get them to grow a little bit larger. A good example of this is the Smart Irrigation Smart Controller Subsidy. This is a program that Salt River Project has operated for a number of years, and we asked why couldn't we do one as well? This program, again, helps people connect customers to irrigation controllers that keep it from irrigating when it rains. Though it doesn't seem like it rains that often here in the city of Phoenix, it's actually a fairly substantial amount of water when aggregated over all the households over the entire year. We're still in conversations with Salt River Project about getting this project off the ground, and we're targeting a winter 22 launch. Another area where the city of Phoenix has had substantial success in the past, but we wanted to see considerable expansion, is on our HOA efficiency checkup program. HOAs are some of our largest water users. They also are a point of centralized decision making where staff can efficiently reach out and make substantial changes in the overall water use. These programs largely focus on making sure that HOAs match those water budgets that we have by comparing their water use to the budget and showing whether there are leaks or whether miswatering is occurring. So far, we have 7 of these done since we relaunched the program last June. And we've identified over 21.5 million gallons of potential water savings. Additionally, we're working to develop a program that will recognize communities that take action so that we can build that civic pride and continue to incentivize people to participate in this program. Another one of our large users that we see are cooling towers. Cooling towers are a piece of technology that most of us don't think about every day, but impact all of our lives, especially in big buildings like these, very radically. What a cooling tower does is it takes all the industrial heat that's produced when you run a big building, and it helps get that heat out of the system through evaporation. Evaporation, by definition, uses water. However, if we make the cooling towers more efficient like we did at Terminal 4, we can reuse water that's not evaporated many more times, and by doing so, reduce the amount of total water use for the entire system. Importantly, Council gave us permission through unanimous support at the May 11th meeting to move forward with a memorandum of understanding to work with 2 funding agencies who will help us bring this funding to partners who'd like to convert their cooling towers. I think this is an important point where we show the potential benefits of bringing corporate partners into the picture so that we can make these changes without creating undue burden on our customers. One of the things that we hear most commonly from customers, however, is that while they like to do the right thing, they aren't exactly sure how to do it and what the processes are. As I mentioned earlier, we have lots of conservation materials that are either available on the web or you can request a paper copy of, but many of these are long and frankly difficult to use. And we think it's important that we give folks who do not want to spend an afternoon studying how to improve their water use a quick and simple solution. So we are working to develop off-the-shelf Xeriscape plans for customers. This will be a set of plans that any customer can go and download, and then have a quick list of materials to bring to the gardener or to their local nursery so that they can get these plans implemented. Importantly, we're partnering with the Sustainable Cities Network at ASU to develop these plans. This is a network that has built large or substantial municipal assets for several other municipalities through the Phoenix area and all across the state in similar programs. These will be complete by the end of the fall semester. A program that we have just finished piloting this week, actually, that we're very proud of are conservation door hangers. This is a fairly simple intervention, but it is just simply a door hanger available in English or Spanish that any City of Phoenix employee who, as they are going about their day, if they see water misuse, can place on that door so that the customer is aware that they're misusing water. This is incredibly important in the desert areas where we encourage people to irrigate in the early morning when a lot of people aren't awake. And so if a employee were to see some water misuse, whether that's spraying on the sidewalk or a broken valve, we could simply place this door hanger on their door so that they could be aware of the potential waste that they're having. And then finally, moving into phase 3, planning for the future. These are programs that take a longer time for the benefits to accrue of. They're good investments for us to make now so that we can reap the benefits tomorrow. The City of Phoenix for many years has had a toilet retrofit program. This program has historically been focused on low-income retrofits, covering 100% of the cost in low-income communities. We're currently reimagining this program as a program that will partner with non-governmental organizations that already specialize in this work so that we can create efficiencies throughout the process. So this would be in the form of funding a non-governmental organization to go out and do this work while they are already in the home doing other home repairs. Additionally, we're in the process of developing a rebate program. The rebate program is imagined as $75 per customer for anybody at any income level, and we're determining the best method to deliver that rebate to a customer, whether that's in the form of a bill credit or a direct check. Improving youth education is obviously an area that we've seen incredible impacts over the years, but takes a long time for those benefits to accrue. We're expanding our school visits right now. We had 6 in-person water festivals this last year. We are looking to develop 1 additional water festival next year. We also will be establishing a working group of educators to remove barriers to teaching water conservation in the classroom. This is basically a process of taking those existing conservation materials that we discussed earlier and tying them to the state standards or developing new state standards where necessary so that when a teacher picks up our materials, they know right away what standard they're teaching to, and they can explain that easily to their administration as they move through their process, really removing some of those barriers along the way. And then our final program is updating building codes. This will require us to partner with planning and development to advise on regular code updates. We think it's very important that we ensure that the lessons that are learned by the city throughout those city actions we discussed earlier are passed on in code review, and an example of that would be cooling towers, as we discussed earlier. In summary, the ad hoc committee plan and our conservation plan in general, implementation is on track. Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 is in progress. Phase 3 is just beginning. And just to put all that in context, when complete, these programs will annually save more than enough water to fill 10,000 swimming pools. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you
Madam
for
Chair,
that
members of the
presentation.
subcommittee.
Comments, questions?
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Councilwoman Stark?
Thank you. On the Smart Irrigation Controller Program, is that available to HOAs as well as individual households?
Excuse me. At this point, it is not. We are working to develop a program that will do so, however. And we think that it would be a good idea to tie that into the broader recognition program that we were talking about. So as you go through your audit, you could receive a smart irrigation controller. And if you live up to your water budget, you could be recognized eventually by the city or perhaps council. However, that program is still in the development phases.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can proceed with that because I live in an HOA where when it rains, I see our sprinklers on. It really drives me crazy. And also on the cooling towers, it sounds like we're working with corporate sponsors as well, but have we talked to Maricopa County and the state of Arizona?
Happy to answer that question as well. No, we have not talked to Maricopa County or the state of Arizona at this time. That program is still very much in its inception, and we're working to develop a couple of pilot projects before we grow it into an additional phase. Okay.
Well, I hope we do work with the county and the state. I think they probably would like to partner with us on this issue, so I would encourage us talking to them. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Back to Troy. Thank you for declaring the stage 1. No panic here.
No panic.
But do want to know what's the matrix for either getting off of, stage 1 or moving on to stage 2?
Right, so essentially what we have to watch for is either reassuring and more solidifying what was happening on Lake Mead, so maybe starting to get lake levels start to rise and recede. What we hope is that going to come in the 2026 reconciliation when we get the regional partners together to work towards a longer solution. What we're working through now is short-term solutions to try to get from 1 year to another year. That's where you saw the drought contingency plans and things like that we enacted. I think the states are getting together here shortly to try to work through, like I said, a longer plan. So that would be how you would get off of it. How you would go further, what I would say is when we start having to utilize drought resources. Right now we are still storing water for drought. We're still conserving some of our extra water. Once we start to utilize that water for everyday use, that would be in our area stage 2, which would be we are in a place where we are using drought resources, I would say.
Thank you. And so sounds like Phoenix, we're fine. We got Salt River and Verde Water coming to us. What about our neighbors? What about the folks around us? Are they in a different place, better place, worse place?
And Cynthia can talk a little bit more, but the challenge with drought as it relates to in the valley or in the state or even regionally is everybody's situation is uniquely different on how they utilize Colorado River water and what percentage of their portfolio it is and what other resources that they have to utilize. But Cynthia meets with them regularly.
And Councilman Garcia, Chairman Guardado, there are differences among cities. I would suggest to you that Phoenix is probably the most robust, although I'm sure a couple East Valley cities would probably disagree with me or argue with that. But there are other cities that are going to be worse off in this situation. But many of them rely upon groundwater, and they'll just continue to pump groundwater. So I hope that helps answer that question.
I guess, is there some of our neighbors that are more dependent on Colorado River water than anything else?
Good question. I would say, without identifying specific municipalities, I'm happy to do that offline if you'd like, but there are a few that are a little more reliant upon Colorado River water than others. Many of the cities in the central Phoenix area have very similar portfolios to ours in the sense that they have SRP water as well as Colorado River water. But yeah, there are a few that are a little more reliant upon that. Tucson's also doesn't obviously have SRP water. The Colorado River water and groundwater are their sole sources.
Thank you. Kind of moving on to, I know we spoke a lot of conservation and it seems like we're focusing a lot on homes. So wondering if off the top of your head, do you have a sense of water usage, homes versus commercial or corporations?
Yeah, on a regional basis or a citywide basis, industrial use is about 0.1% of our total accounts, but that accounts for about 5 to 6% of our water use is in industrial use. So it is a fairly small amount of customers, so less than 250. And a lot of what we see because of their water use is so diverse on how they use it. Really what we're trying to focus on with them initially is the cooling tower situation and trying to get them to convert to that, because that is one thing that they uniformly do is cool their buildings. The other one piece is the interior plumbing of toilet retrofits and other things. With our extremely large customers, we're engaged with them and working with them to work on recycling, similar to what we do with the cooling towers. And what we find in some of these industries is if we can treat the water and reuse it on site, that they can put that back and recycle it over and over again, therefore reducing their water footprint. And so we were talking with them about that.
Okay. So as we're drawing businesses, as we're bringing new types of businesses, is this something we should consider, water usage, as we're attracting or approving folks coming forward?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we are working on is sustainable businesses and bring in sustainable growth. And what does that look like for Phoenix? And trying to come up with parameters around that. Cynthia and Karen and I have been talking about that a lot. And I think at some point in time we want to come back and talk with you about sustainable growth and what that looks like. Because our water portfolio is diverse and we have more resources, than we utilize today. We can still grow. It's just doing it the right way.
And I know we're 100-year guarantee, but things are shifting, and there's also new technology. So I wanted to have ask a question about, I know other cities, and I mentioned this in our briefing, El Paso and others are moving with reclaimed or more innovative technologies. Wondering where we are at both in, I guess, in where we're at in thought or progress, and also is there suggestions of investment we should make to get to a better place to be able to use those types of technologies?
Chairwoman, Councilor Garcia, that is a great question, because I mean, obviously that's the future, is trying to develop new water resources and taking the water resources that we have and putting that back to the highest and most beneficial use, basically converting it to wastewater. As we've said previously, all of our wastewater is put back to beneficial use now, whether that's cooling Palo Verde nuclear generating station or irrigation or other things. But as you progress with drought conditions and things like that, essentially what you want to look for is eventually converting that to drinking water. Yeah, we're actively pursuing that and looking at strategies on how to do that. We have a water reclamation plant, the Cave Creek Water Reclamation Plant up north, that's coming online in 2025. We're currently looking at ways to incorporate technology into that to potentially put that back to beneficial use, and whether that's either direct or indirect. We're working with the state of Arizona to develop regulations around this. It is a concept that isn't used in Arizona yet. It is in other states. California and New Mexico and Texas are a little bit ahead of us. And so working with the state of Arizona next month in July to start working on the regulations around that and what kind of technology and parameters and proof of concept that they would want. But yeah, I think that is something that we are highly interested in, and is something that is in Phoenix's future.
The last slide had the beautiful deck at Tres Rios. So again, we don't have the direct answer, but what would it take from that water, which is kind of at the end of the line, at least as I understand it from our process, what would it take to take that water to the tap?
So a couple more treatment processes, some membrane processes. Those processes exist today. That technology exists today. It's just implementing that, collecting that water, and putting that back through that treatment process to then send it on. There's a couple of variations on what you can do after that. We can either go indirect, which we ingest that into the ground and then pull it out with a well, or go through the membranes, as I previously spoke about. Is you could put it through that and then introduce that back into either a water treatment plant or right into the pipes, depending on what you want to do and what level of treatment that you want to go to. All of those processes are energy intensive and costly. But like I said, it puts back that water reuse back to beneficial use, and it adds another layer to our water portfolio that isn't there today.
Thank you. No, I'd be really interested as we make these decisions. I know all these things come with a cost, but even as we're looking forward to funding sources, I think studies or just an actual assessment of what it would look like or cost for us to start moving that direction, I'd be really interested. You spoke, last question, I promise, of some regional partnerships. What does that look like, and can that also, that innovation part also look like we're working with other cities, the tribes were mentioned, or the state?
Councilman Garcia, some of the examples of some of these partnerships that we've had in the past is obviously our exchange with the city of Tucson. We also have a similar exchange with the city of Avondale, and in doing that deal with Avondale, we realized that Avondale was a city that could not actually access its Colorado River water, the actual water. They were taking it, the water that they were entitled to, and they were putting it in the ground someplace not close to Avondale, and then pumping their groundwater. And one of the things we found is that we had adequate capacity in our system to be able to wheel it, to use our infrastructure. And so today, Avondale gets Colorado River water. There are other examples of things that we could do in that vein, especially if we start talking about retreating or using the reclaimed water at 91st Avenue or 23rd Avenue. There are possibilities for other opportunities in that regard that we could work with other communities. As well, we've been working, we have a history of working with the Gila River Indian community on creating system conservation that they've given water over the years, as well as potentially storing water, and those opportunities are continuing.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. So just following up on that, one of the things I know, Inger, we've talked about this already, is that, this is a huge issue that we need to deal with. We are the 5th largest city in the country, and I think, the city of Phoenix is not going to be able to deal with this on their own. So I think that it is important. I know that a lot of my colleagues have met with the Gila River Indian community that's at this moment working with Mayor Romero in Tucson. So I would like for us to be able, maybe sometime in the fall, be able to put a meeting together, like some sort of panel to talk about conservation and how do we work with them. I know that I've also heard about the presentations that Terry Goddard is also doing around this topic. So I think it's going to take more than just us, right? And I get it, and I think that we are moving into that direction where we're working with other cities and we're hopefully working with the state and with the county. But I do think that we need to bring good stakeholders to the table to work with us on this, just because I think whatever changes we're going to have to make as a state rather than the city of Phoenix, just because we want to make sure that we can stay on top of this, especially if at some point we're going to have to go talk to constituents. I think it's important for us to work with everyone and get everyone's ideas and try to figure out what are some of the best practices and things that people think that we should be doing together. And I think the most important thing for me is as we're making changes and as we start looking for solutions, that we can at least say that we listened to everyone and that we heard everyone and that we were able to come up with a really good plan, working with everyone around the state. I think it's a heavy lift, and I think it's a good one, and we need to do it. But I think that we should make sure that we bring everyone to the table and that we're working with everyone to make this happen.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Karen and I have talked about what that process might be and working through the right way to do that. So we'll continue to do that through the summer and then make sure we're back in the fall to discuss that.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilwoman Ansari?
Thank you, Chairwoman. And first of all, thank you to everyone who's part of the presentation. It's very, I guess, it's a relief that we have such smart and committed people at the helm of this. And Dr. Wilson, welcome to the City of Phoenix. We're lucky to have you. So I think for me, it's kind of, when you get the first slide with all of the context about we're in a drought this bad after 1,200 years, Lake Mead is at 31% capacity, Lake Powell is at 24%, all of that. And then I don't know if you can go back to the slide that showed the actions that we're going to take for stage 1 with large scale long-term effort. I guess it would be helpful to get a little bit more explanation. I think when you hear the context, it all sounds very doom and gloom and terrifying. And even hearing the 100-year assurance, in the span of where we want to be in terms of a city, 100 years sounds like nothing. So can you explain a bit more, why we're not taking a little bit more proactive and maybe just more extreme action and maybe bigger actions? I know Las Vegas, for example, has looked at banning grass lawns, which makes a big difference. So can you explain the decision making a little bit behind this? And I know there's a lot of data behind it, but it would be helpful, I think, for us to hear.
Yeah, Chairman and Councilwoman Osari, thank you for the question, because that does come up quite a bit. Like I said, as you look at everybody's water portfolio, it is different in how much they're reliant upon the Colorado River. In the city of Phoenix, with it only making up 40% of our water demand use, and even under a Tier 2A or Tier 2B, which will be declared probably later this year, we are still storing water for drought. We are still putting water resources underground to plan for the future. And so what I would say is as we go into further stages or more extreme stages, that
those would happen once those resources are challenged.
Okay.
As you look at our drought management plan, essentially the stage 2, as it's been defined, is when an insufficient supply situation actually occurs. And that's where that's a little bit of a challenge of how could we say that we're actually in a situation where we're actually in shortage when we're actually storing water for drought and trying to prepare and hold off it as long as possible.
So based on that, how quickly or not quickly do you think we could go from the stage 1 of the declaration to 2, warning, 3, emergency, et cetera?
And Cynthia can go into this a little bit. The last current projections that we have from the Bureau of Reclamation is we're probably going to a Tier 2A or Tier 2B this next in calendar year 23. In 24, maybe a Tier 3 based on the projections. Like I said, and Cindy can talk a little bit more about this. So we're at least Tier 3 maybe by 2024. But even that, with everybody trying to do the best to hold that off, it is possible that it is farther out than that as well.
But you're saying stage 3 by 2024?
Potentially.
Yes. Potentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's like I said, there's the regions getting together and the regions trying to do things like the 500 plus plan and these other things to try to hold off and push that out as far as possible. The current projections, as we've seen it, has a Tier 3 potentially in 2024.
If I could, I want to clarify that Tier 3 is different than the stage of the drought management plan.
Right.
Troy is referring to the drought contingency plan, which is the 3-state agreement as to how we would handle reductions in the event that Lake Mead elevations fall. So Tier 2A, Tier 2B, Tier 3 are all drought contingency plan tiers that are statewide and regional. The stages of our drought management plan as a city are what I think you're asking about. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
So yeah, and I think it was the tier versus the stages that I was getting. So stage 3 water emergency is not 2024, or it is?
No. So the drought management plan is irregardless of the tiers. Well, it's intermixed because the tiers help signal insufficient supplies or potential supply shortages that would be coming. And so the tier shortages by the federal government would then lead us then to go evaluate the drought management plan to then effectively choose the correct stage that we would be implementing. And so at this time, we foresee the stage 1 water alert. Like I said, we don't see in the foreseeable future, in the next few years or so, going to stage 2, but those situations could change depending on what happens on Lake Mead.
Okay, that's helpful. And then you mentioned these, or I forget who mentioned it, but we talked a little bit about industrial and the fact that industrial uses account for 5 to 6% of water use. And that really struck a chord with me because I feel, obviously in District 7, we have a lot of industrial, a lot of zoning for industrial. We know that industrial uses are a significant source of our pollution in the city. It's wreaking havoc on neighborhoods. We're having so many fires as well as a result. And then they are also big water users, as it turns out. So all of that to say, could we look at potential zoning changes or restrictions or more just enforcement around industrial uses? And there's a lot of zoning out there for more industrial along the Rio, along a lot of places it shouldn't be. And if it's also a water issue, I'm just wondering if we can it's not really a question, but more of a, is this something that you think we can look into, how we can look at industrial uses and maybe, being a little bit more selective about adding more and enforcing the ones that already do exist?
If I could, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Ansari, I think that is the conversation that Troy and Cynthia and I are having about future growth and how to accommodate the water uses that come with that growth. And that is very, very important conversation for us to bring to the council. And it may or may not have land use implications, but operating within the general plan that exists today, how do we accommodate new water users? So we are talking actively about how to handle that.
Okay, great. And then my last question, just wanted a little bit more information about the phase 3 updates to building codes. I'm wondering if that is something that will come in our next building code update, or what the timeline looks like.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I will be completely forthright and say that that is a program that we are just getting started diving into right now. Our current look is that we are currently on the 2018 building codes. There have been 2021 international building codes promoted. Those have not been adopted. And we'll be beginning those conversations with planning and development in just the next couple of weeks.
And I would add, Councilwoman Ansari, as you well know, in the Electric Vehicle Ad Hoc Committee, we're talking about building code changes, and the horizon that we've identified is probably 2025.
Okay, so given that we're looking at water efficiency building codes, EVs, et cetera, are you envisioning just some sort of like sustainability, just a series of sustainability updates to the building code that would kind of be a package, or what does that look like?
I really want to confer with the Planning and Development Department about how best to approach that. Typically, these are uniform codes, but we can depart from them in certain circumstances. But I definitely want them to answer that question.
Fair enough.
I can maybe just add to that. MAG has a building official group that look regionally at building codes that address the desert, and I think that will be kind of the beginning of how we address water and EV. So I think it's important that we make sure that our chief building official is very engaged in those discussions, and the building codes come out every 3 years. So
great. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Great, thank you. So with that, thank you guys so much for that presentation, and we look forward to continue to talk about this. Thank you. And this is another opportunity for a call to the public. Do we have anyone? No? Great. Okay, thank you for that. And now for future agenda items, do any of my colleagues have anything they would like to add for the next agenda? No? Okay, thank you for that. And with that, that is the last item on today's agenda. I want to thank my fellow committee members and all of our city staff and the members of the public who participated in today's meeting. We are adjourned.